Welcome, everybody. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending where you are. Most folks, I assume, are joining us from campus, so good evening. My name is Matt Nash, and I'm the Managing Director for Social Innovation at Duke's Innovation and Entrepreneurship Initiative. I'm also an adjunct professor of the practice at the Stanford School of Public Policy, where I'm a senior fellow with the Center for International Development. And I want to welcome you to this event. It's actually part of a week-long series of events coming to you from the Duke-UNICEF Innovation Accelerator, which is a partnership between Duke University, especially through the Duke Innovation and Entrepreneurship Initiative, UNICEF, and especially their water, sanitation, and hygiene team, and the US Fund for UNICEF. And together we're looking to identify, assess, build, develop, and scale innovations around the world in some of those pressing areas facing children today. So this is one of a number of events we're doing all week long. I really encourage you to check out the whole series of events if you're available. We have most of our sessions take place in the morning because many of the innovators from our first two cohorts are based in Africa. And so we do most of our sessions in the morning, but we've also got some evening sessions going on, including tomorrow night, an amazing panel of social entrepreneurs. And so really encourage you to check out all the events. Feel free to join those. Tonight, we're going to focus specifically on careers in social innovation. So I've been at Duke now for about 17 years, and I've just seen, a dramatic increase in the number of students who are looking for a career that is kind of maybe outside of what we think of as a traditional pathway, but really wants a career of consequence or a career of impact, looking to work in whether it's the sustainable development goals or other areas, students who really want to connect up their passions with their profession in many ways, and not necessarily to delay that. And so I've been so thrilled over the years to work with a number of students to help them discern their own career path and their own true north, and to determine how best to explore these sorts of careers. And, as we probably know, many times career centers at universities aren't as well equipped to help students explore these areas because they tend to be very, very niche. There's so many different ways and they're often hard to learn about. And so I found one of the best ways to help students is to connect them to practitioners, folks who are actually out in the world doing things. And we're so blessed to have some amazing alumni in the field of social innovation in such a broad array of fields, from domestic to international, from you name it, from global health and education, environment, climate change, and so many other fields. And so what we try to do is find ways to connect students and alumni. And so tonight is a great opportunity to do that. We've got 4 amazing alumni here to join us to talk a bit about their career, their pathway to impact. And the way we're going to do this is I will ask a few opening questions after briefly introducing the panel. I'm mainly going to have them introduce themselves, but after briefly introducing the panel, I will ask them to describe a little bit about the work that they do, and then to ask a few more questions, probably 1 or 2 more questions after that. But then I'd like to quickly get to your questions. So for the students in the audience, feel free to put questions in the chat. We will try and answer as many of those live as we can, but also I've encouraged the panelists and colleagues to feel free to respond to them in chat in real time as well. So we'll do our best to do that, and we're going to go until 6:30. So for those of you who can stay the whole session, please join us for the next about 55 minutes or so at this point. So let me just quickly introduce our panelists, and then I'll call each in turn to share a little bit more about the work they do and they're in their current job, and maybe give some examples. So you see here our panelists' photos before you. We have Jason Lee, who is Trinity 11, who earned his also Master's in Environmental Management in 2018, and he's the Associate Director at Quantified Ventures, doing some fascinating work in impact investing. We have Philile Shongwe, who is a alumna in waiting. She's currently a student, but she'll be an alumna very soon, actually, and she is in the Master's in International Development Policy program. She'll be graduating in the spring. She's also a Rotary Peace Fellow. She's the founder and executive director of Govuka, so we'll hear more about that. I really was excited to have her join so she can maybe bridge the time from being a student to being an alum and talk about the work that she's doing. She's also winner of the Global D Prize. We have one of the earliest students I ever worked with at Duke, who arrived in my first full year at Duke when I was at the Center for the Advancement of Social Entrepreneurship over at Fuqua, Tim Scheu, who is in the class of Fuqua 07. He's the Director of Engagement Management for Changemakers for Ashoka. If you're not familiar with Ashoka, it's the global network of leading social entrepreneurs, an amazing network. And Tim was one of our first two CASE social sector scholars, which every year CASE recognizes some incoming MBAs who have a passion and commitment and capacity for leadership in the social sector. And Tim has been a real trailblazer. Sorry, Tom. So Tim has been. Sorry, Tim. Tim's been a real trailblazer in that area. He's giggling because his cohort at the time was another student, Tom Mitchell. So Tom slipped off my tongue there for a moment. And then we have Sam Kelly here, who is Trinity 18. He's focused on mechanical engineering, and he's currently the project lead for Sentinel AI at Conservation X Labs, which is also founded by another great alum of ours, Alex Dagan, who was the first, who was the chief scientist at USAID before launching Conservation X Labs. And Sam, while he was a student, he also was very entrepreneurial. He launched the Conservation Technology Club and an amazing conference, the Blueprints Conference, that ran for several years. And so what I'd like to do is I'll call on each panelist in turn to give a brief, 3 or so minute introduction to their current work and maybe some examples of that. And then I'll ask a few questions about kind of how they prepared themselves for this work, how they, what recommendations they would have for those of you who are considering careers in this area. And one of the things I hope you get out of this is that there's so many ways to engage in careers of impact and innovation. It just doesn't have to be just one type. I mean, you don't have to launch a social venture to have really meaningful work, and you don't have to work on any one pathway. There's so many ways that you can explore as you consider your life pathway. So let's start with Jason. I'll try and go in the order you see up here to help folks keep names straight. Jason, I have to say, I love the line in your bio that your career in environmental finance comes from a singular conviction. The environmental problems of today and tomorrow are too wicked to be limited to the tools of yesterday. And it reminds me of a quote from Einstein I love to share about, we can't solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. So I'd love to know a little bit more about the work that you're doing at Quantified Ventures. What is your job like? What do you do? What does it look like in the line of work that you're working on, Jason?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Matt, and thanks everyone for your time. As you mentioned earlier, we work in the field of impact investing, which for those of you that aren't familiar, it's a really rapidly developing segment of the capital markets that, the traditional investment capital, a portion of it is starting to become really interested in what are the ESG, the environmental social governance impact, for the purposes of this webinar, environmental and health and social maybe, of those investment dollars, right? And that line in my bio came from a realization a few months into my Master of Environmental Management degree that the program focuses a lot on law and policy and economics, which combined with volunteerism and philanthropy have been the toolkit of environmental projects or action in the past, right? And the same goes for social projects. And impact investing is the realization that, is there a way to tap traditional capital markets and financial vehicles to bring capital to projects that have traditionally been tackled by policy or regulation or volunteering or philanthropy? And so what we do, the issue there is that there's a relatively limited set of projects and companies and programs that fit the risk return profile that investors are looking for, right? And we've seen, the real rise in like renewable energy development is an example that really fits that risk return profile. But for a long time, it hadn't, right? And a lot of the programs and projects that people on this call care about, whether that's climate resilience or childhood poverty or lead remediation or clean drinking water in developing countries, whatever it might be, like the risk return profile is really hard, or it's an unfamiliar risk and return profile or context. And so what we do at Quantified Ventures, we try to take those projects and pick ones that have the potential to be shaped into investments that are familiar or amenable to mainstream capital, and develop them to a point where they become investable by those parties. And that those projects can range from things like helping small rural communities organize and set up a financial vehicle and organizational structure to invest collectively in outdoor recreation infrastructure, which then they feed back into it based on the increased tax receipts from increased visitation. Another example would be we have a project in the Appalachian region helping set up programs and clinics to serve women, pregnant mothers who are struggling with drug addiction. And if you help them get treatment and help them in the early stages of pregnancy and all the way through the early stages of birth, to how does that help save money to the system, both private and the public systems? And does that provide an incentive? Can you set up a program where the investment dollars that those beneficiaries provide up front helps them save money down the line, and sort of shifting that? And so a lot of our work is, I'll talk about this more later, but it's a real sort of jack of all trades of shepherding a project from inception all the way to investment.
That's great. I really appreciate that introduction. And, there's such growing interest here among students in impact investing. Certainly we had founded the Case Impact Investing Initiative back in 2010, but the undergraduates more recently have founded their Duke Impact Investing Group and had the opportunity to receive $100,000 from the Board of Trustees to create an impact fund. So it's great that there are alumni like you kind of in these fields, because they're so unknown to many students as even a whole career that they never even knew of. And as they're discovering it, they're looking for ways to better understand those opportunities. So thank you, Jason. Great to have you here. I look forward to hearing more from you. Now, Philile, you were in my class last fall, the social innovation class, which actually we have a number of students in that class this fall who are joining us for this panel. And one of the opportunities you came across was the Global D Prize. And I know that is supporting you in the work that you're doing with Govuka. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about what is Govuka, what's the focus of that, and where are you in launching and growing that venture?
Yeah, it's really great to. First of all, just really great to be here. Really excited to engage with amazing co-panelists. A little bit about Govuka. Yes, it's a venture that basically was founded earlier this year. Our goal, it's a nonprofit based out of Swaziland, which is where I'm from, that aims to train and mentor older peer educators in high school to deliver a sort of proven data-driven sexual health curriculum with the ultimate goal of helping to reduce teenage pregnancies. So really the gap that we had identified is around sort of how sexual education is delivered and targeted in this particular area, and how that has huge implications for people's health, both in terms of pregnancies and as well as new HIV infections. So this is sort of the space that we're sitting in. And this year has been really interesting since our official sort of launch of activities. We are, original conception of the idea was an in-person model, but COVID has really helped us to think more about how to, in this period, digitize a few things, but also work towards a more hybrid model going forward. So right now, where we are is working to test a preliminary curriculum that actually is right now being tested in sort of a prototype version that will be turned into an app. So that's an interesting space where I'm working with someone that I actually met at a class at Duke, who is a curriculum developer and now works in it for a great sort of early childhood development company. So working with her closely to test with a few users, working in very sort of scrappy ways using WhatsApp and email and just figuring out the kinks of working sort of low resource settings to launch something great. So next year will be sort of the fully fledged rollout of this particular curriculum. But I'm happy to talk through like process points, some of the challenges, some of the really bright spots along the way, and obviously so happy to be interacting with social innovation students as well.
It's such a fascinating story because you're this founder, but you're also a student. And of all times to launch a venture, here in the midst of COVID, we had a panel discussion this morning as part of the forum where we're talking about just the resiliency and the need for agility and being nimble during a time of COVID. And we had a young innovator join us from Thailand, who's also been launching her venture during this time period. It's really caused her to think about delivery mechanisms and business models and so forth in ways that weren't previously necessarily considered pre-COVID. So thrilled to have you here, Philile. We'll hear a little bit more about your work soon. Let me shift over to Tim. And Tim, the fact that you're working at Ashoka just is incredible, because it's such a well-known and respected network in the world of social entrepreneurship. Really, the leading social entrepreneurs in the world are part of that network. We've long been members of the Ashoka Changemaker Campus Consortium, so it's been fun to follow your career since you graduated from Fuqua. And so, curious, maybe you could tell us a little bit more about what Ashoka is for those who don't know, and what kind of work do you do there?
Sure, Matt. So Ashoka, for those of you who are less familiar with it, we've been around for about 40 years, had a founder, or have a founder named Bill Drayton. And he was trying to identify leading social entrepreneurs with the idea that if you can give them unrestricted funding, that and freed them and their entrepreneurial character, that they could be drivers of immense systems and framework change. And so, in the years since he identified the first Ashoka Fellow, there have been at least a handful of Nobel laureates, who were identified as Ashoka Fellows very early on in their career, and then use that as sort of a jumping off point to sort of much bigger things and sort of broader collaborations. It's been interesting over the past decade to see how Ashoka's orientation has shifted a little bit. And so, we started off as this effort to identify these leading social entrepreneurs. During the early aughts, we got a bunch of funding from Piero Mediar, right, one of the original founders of eBay, and sort of he's since spawned a variety of philanthropic engines himself. But he was saying, well, we have to move beyond hero worship, right? What if we leave all the change making to everyone else, like what are the rest of us to do? And so early in the 2000s, we pivoted to a much broader mission, which is to create an everyone a change maker world. And practically that's what we're doing these days. And so the way that manifests is that in any given metro level, we're trying to create an ecosystem for change making. And practically that means that we want people who are tapped into their sense of empathy, who feel powerful and are good working in teams. And so when you think about how to cultivate that, well, you look at universities like Duke. So Ashoka has partnered with universities all around the world, 30 in the United States, where we try and cultivate these cultures of change making where students feel powerful to spot problems on campus and then, come up with entrepreneurial solutions to them, right? All in as a sort of a form of practice for broader sort of communities once they leave the university. We continue to elect fellows, these leading social entrepreneurs, not only because they're incredible role models for many of us who are earlier on in our change-making career, but because many of the fellows are creating spaces for others to participate in change-making. We work with companies, right? So especially these days with all the emphasis on ESG, more firms are looking to blend social impact with business strategy. And so we work with executives at a variety of different corporations to help them drive their own leadership development and also create sort of a similar culture of change making to have a change maker company. And so, we try and sort of hold those pieces together where ideally, we're creating at a metro level kind of an immune response to problems, right? People are spotting problems more quickly. Anyone feels empowered to offer a solution and collaborate with others to address it as rapidly as possible. So it's kind of heady at times, but it's a wonderful challenge and an incredible network, as I'm saying.
Yeah, it's reminding me of we partnered with Ashoka back in 2011 to host a global conference on social entrepreneurship education. And the first night we held a TEDx, and I tell the story a lot, that there was a speaker at the TEDx who said, I dream of a day in which college students ask themselves, not what's your major, but what problem are you trying to solve? And so that kind of problem orientation, right? Identifying and then having a sense of agency to address those problems, which I think is brilliant that Ashoka has really kind of shifted to this everyone a change maker world. We need to develop these skills in younger folks. So thrilled to have you here, Tim. We'll turn back to you in a little bit and hear a little bit more about the work that you do. How about Sam? You know, Sam, when you were here as a student, you were a change maker. You identified a problem. You helped launch the Conservation Technology Club, and then you've gone on to work in some amazing realms. You know, I know you're a co-founder yourself, and you've been working at Conservation X Labs. Tell us a little bit more about what Conservation X Labs is, and then we'll hear a little bit later about the work that you do.
Yeah, sure. So hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. Excited to chat with everyone. So Conservation X Labs is a technology company at its heart, but is a nonprofit, and those two worlds often don't overlap that much. And really what we're trying to do is address the underlying causes for the biodiversity crisis. And what that really means is harnessing both the collective intelligence of people around the world. So we run prizes and challenges, but also develop products ourselves that potentially have impact as far as those biodiversity loss metrics. So we've been working on a couple of products. I'm an engineer, graduated in 2018 from Pratt, and what the first product we've really been working on is a handheld genetic diagnostic tool that allows anyone to access the power of genetic diagnostics in the field. And that really means that things like customs and border patrol in developing countries can have the ability to understand what's going through their borders, because often the wildlife trade actually runs alongside other illegal and illicit trades. And then this other project I've been working on, Sentinel AI, which is what I now lead, is really about democratizing access to the power of AI for in ecosystem monitoring technologies like trail cameras and acoustic monitors. So you can really, you know, we've got so much data coming in and not much being done with it. And so really trying to close that loop and allow people to better manage the nature that's out there.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, often folks don't think of the intersection of conservation, environment, and technology, and you're really kind of living that and spotting really important innovations and bringing those to life. So thrilled to have you here, Sam. Why don't we go back to the panelists and tell us a little bit more about the day in the life, or a week in the life, or month in life. What are some of the variety of different things that you do, and kind of what skills do you have to bring to the work that you do? I wonder. Maybe we'll go back in order one more time, and then we'll mix it up. But back to you, Jason. Tell us a little bit more about the specific work that you do and the skills that you've had to develop as part of that work.
Yeah. First of all, fascinating to hear all the different backgrounds. I did a little bit of Google stalking of everyone on the board, but you know, super cool to hear, you know, everything. And I think my work the panel sort of makes the point that I was going to make in talking about my work, which is it takes a little bit of everything, right, to drive forward social innovation. And there's a reason why why innovation is hard is the system is set up to run and self-perpetuate. And so to make change, it requires bringing together lots of different threads that haven't typically been mixed together before. And in my work, it's a little bit of consulting, a little bit of like policy analysis, a little bit of economic and financial modeling, a little bit of you know, just community organizing. And because the projects that we're trying to build funding and financing strategies for are the ones that have been shut out from traditional capital sources and or are scrapping for grants, which, you know, as many folks know, is kind of a brutal, unpredictable world, is we're having to take these projects that don't have a really clear coalition or don't have a really clear understanding of what the costs and benefits are, or, you know, how do you articulate this or market this to potential supporters? And we help that projects go, you know, and we come in on projects at various different stages. There are some projects where it's just a seed of an idea. So we're having to develop what the project is alongside our community partners, which are typically nonprofits or municipalities or counties. And in other cases, they come pretty well baked and they're like, we don't know how to get this across the finish line to actually raise investment capital. And we help with that financial strategy and guide them through the capital raise. And so it's sort of a mix of, I spent a lot of time in meetings, you know, doing that consulting thing, a lot of time in Excel and PowerPoint. I think communication and conveying why folks should support this project, or why helping folks think outside of the box and like, okay, I understand this seems like it should be charity, or it seems like it should be regulation, or it seems like it should be X, Y, or Z. But what if you thought about it differently? I think I'm surprised by how much that that storytelling visioning aspect and getting people to understand that things could be different. And all the hard skills, I think, almost fall in service of that storytelling and that narrative and that imagination building. Is that helpful?
Wow. Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah. Some people wouldn't really think about, but crafting that narrative, that story to persuade people in ways that has been real critical for you. I appreciate you sharing that, Jason. How about for Philile? I mean, in your case, you're still a student, right? And yet you're also launching this venture, and I'm sure that comes with all kinds of demands on your time that sometimes may interfere at the time of exams or assignments and so forth. So how have you been navigating this period? What are the kinds of things that you're doing to launch this venture?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's taken a while, but I think it's been important to carve out time and structure a little bit, just so that I feel like things are moving along and the people I'm working with feel supported by me going forward. So typically for me, venture-wise, let's just put school aside, it's mostly driven by initiatives that we're working on. So I can talk through, like, right now, there are two things that we're sort of balancing and trying to get done. One is we're sort of lightly partnering with a design organization based out of Nairobi called IDEO.org to offer like fellowships to girls, like design thinking fellowships. And we're sort of fielding the application pool and making sure that we are communicating with that. So I just carve out time maybe twice a week to field those emails, to make sure that I'm communicating with our partners in Nairobi. And then in terms of our own project teams, it's also I have like a set time where I jump on a Zoom call with my communications director, and we sort of align on sort of work streams and goals, and we kind of keep it at that weekly rhythm. And then similarly with the curriculum developer, that's a little bit more like messier, because the flow of information from users to her and myself depends on, what problems they're encountering with the prototypes that we're testing. But ultimately, I try to keep those touch points to the time carved out to that, and then have to just like extend some grace about the things that I really did not have the time to do, and just say, look, this is what we're doing for this week, and that's good enough. And that's what's keeping me sane even through midterms. So that is something I would say, just like try and structure and think about a sustainable rhythm, and make sure that you have, typical organizational skills like Gantt charts and good calendar and scheduling. Yeah.
And I appreciate that idea of holding some protected time in your week to work on these things. For those joining in, some students may know of INE has the Student Founders Program, which is a nice opportunity to work in a small group of students at a consistent time each week with a coach. And it's kind of a protected time, just as if you were an athlete and you'd have practice, or an artist and you have a rehearsal. The Student Founders Program gives you a time each week to kind of advance your ideas no matter where you are, and have a group of folks to share with. And so you've managed to carve out that and protect that time. I'm curious, Philile, do you think, what will happen for you after graduation? Will you continue to be working on this project? Will you increase your time on it, or what will happen for you?
Yeah, it's a timely question. I was gonna say, in my spare time, I am looking for sort of funding opportunities, or opportunities that will help me continue to spend a little bit more time on Govuka going forward. Yeah.
Have you considered applying to Echoing Green?
Yes.
Great. If you do apply, make sure I know, because we can boost a couple of Duke students or alumni through that first round. So
Awesome.
Fantastic, Philile. It's so great to hear a little bit more. We'll come back. How about Tim? You've managed to be a virtual worker prior to COVID. I mean, you really kind of pioneered this, because I know you've you're in Florida currently, right? And you've been in other locations. The Ashoka kind of main headquarters is up in Arlington, Virginia, across the Potomac from DC. Tell us a little bit more of the kind of work that you do. And also, I'm just curious, being a virtual worker, how you've fashioned a career that has met kind of your needs for your lifestyle.
Sure. Thanks, Matt. Yeah, I mean, just at a high level, right? I'm at Ashoka. I'm kind of sitting at the intersection between sort of revenue and strategy. And so, for those that are familiar with the philanthropic sector or CSR or anything like that, that there's a whole lot of money flowing. But oftentimes there are strings attached, whether or not it's, the requirements that you might see of international development agencies, right, in their reporting to USAID, or, to the extent that it's associated with a company, there might be any number of communications that you have to offer in service of sort of that particular firm. To sort of these angel investors or donors that might have just very idiosyncratic ideas as to what needs to be done and sort of expectations that they get to sit on the board. So all of that is kind of a domain in which I operate. Ashoka, though they wouldn't say this officially, we kind of operate as an organization with like 30 different franchises around the world. So yes, we have our headquarters in Arlington, but we have sort of many colleagues in Sub-Saharan Africa, East Asia, Southeast Asia, Europe, Latin America. So to your question about the virtual work, Matt, I mean, the nice thing is, I had to come down to Florida for personal reasons. But when I moved down here, because I was part of this global team, if I'm in an office in Arlington, it doesn't make me any closer to sort of colleagues in Madrid or Buenos Aires or Lagos, So I think during a non-pandemic time, you compensate by trying to travel and sort of get, engaging face-to-face wherever possible, being there, to hold space for the conversations that they want to have. And so, I guess practically, my day-to-day, it's a lot about working with people who are leading fundraising and partnership work in any of these different countries, and them saying, well, I have an opportunity with a big financial service firm in France, and they're trying to do X, Y, and Z, and we have a lot of interest in electing, say, fellows that have a gender lens, and does the money that they want to give map with the work that we want to do, and how do we navigate that dance and sort of keep them happy? And when do we say no? I think there's a lot of scrutiny these days, and when Ashoka has a network of almost 4,000 fellows around the world, if we sign a partnership with, say, something in the extractive industry or something like that, they're like, I want nothing to do with Ashoka. So every partnership we explore, it comes with some strings, and we just have to be really mindful of that. I'll leave it there, but happy to elaborate further.
No, that's exciting, Tim. Appreciate you sharing that. And you don't often think of the goodwill that a social enterprise has, but how easy it could be to damage that goodwill by entering a partnership that's maybe not all that well thought through, right? And that could then therefore affect the fellows and other partners. So thanks for sharing that, Tim. How about Sam? Tell us a little bit more about the kind of work that you do, and how do you draw upon skills you developed at Duke and elsewhere, perhaps, to do that sort of work?
Yeah. No, so I think of my kind of day-to-day is split about 50-50 between like being a pure kind of technical engineer, and then the other half being, essentially, project lead or, internal CEO, whatever you want to call it, of this project. And so, whether I've got that engineering hat on or the other hat on, it looks very different. And week to week, that can switch up wildly. So, I might be out visiting a partner that is, wants to do a project with us one week, and then the next week just be head down and code. One of the things that I've really had to learn, just because of the nature of this field, there's not necessarily engineers flowing in here, so I've had to learn a lot of new skills, a lot of new engineering skills. So I graduated mechanical engineering, but I do a lot more hardware, so electrical engineering and software engineering these days. And so a lot of my time is also spent learning on the fly, wherever possible. And so, when I have the the other hat on, a lot of it is managing partners, because one of the things that I've learned is that engineering doesn't necessarily move at the speed you want it to. And making sure that everyone is still happy and still engaged it actually takes a lot of active effort. And so making sure that you check in regularly and stuff is actually a large part of my job as well.
Thank you for sharing that, Sam. It sounds like you've really been able to draw upon, but build your skills. I know for me, I've always enjoyed jobs where you're learning, right? And you're staying engaged. It sounds like all of you have been able to do that. I mean, you're all kind of, sometimes you're operating at the edge of competences, I would say, where you're learning something quick and having to learn. And that's what I enjoy, you know. And I'm curious for any panelists who'd like to respond, you know, with the students who've joined us tonight, are there certain skills or experiences or other things that you think would be useful for them to consider, you know, pursuing if they're interested in careers in these fields? Are there, whether while they're here at Duke or whether it's as internships or perhaps just after graduation, are there kinds of experiences, skills, or other opportunities that would be useful if someone were interested in a career of the type that you have? Anybody would care to answer that? What do you think? Anybody who'd like to go first, you're welcome to just jump right in.
Sure, I'll quickly go. I think like for me, like whenever I look at like resumes for internships or the like, or a new hire, I really love seeing people that just, you know, it may not have been their perfect project, but at least, you know, during college, they jumped in and really tried their hand at something. And that really kind of gets me excited. So just like jumping in the deep end with something that you're passionate about. At a place like Duke, there is so many, you know, fantastic resources, clubs, research labs, whatever it is. Just getting it involved outside of the core curriculum, I think is something that I would really encourage.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. Get something hands-on on a project work, take some leadership opportunities. Yeah.
I build just on what Sam was saying. I mean, attached to that is this comfort with ambiguity. I mean, so much of the work that we are doing and sort of the challenges that we're tackling broadly require sort of this ability to like take a couple of deep breaths, survey the landscape around you, survey who it is that you can talk with and collaborate with, and find some way to move forward, because there is a paralysis that can hit you pretty quick in this sector if you don't develop that like muscle to sort of move forward.
Great tip, Tim. When I was in the Peace Corps, I had this motto of rigid flexibility. I was always flexible and I was rigid about that. And these days, for the last 8 summers or so, I've been taking students, undergrads, Duke undergrads, to Detroit as part of our Duke Engage Detroit program, although we've been virtual the last couple summers. But one of the questions we ask in the interview is about their comfort level with ambiguity, you know, because oftentimes that's what students find in these kinds of internships. They're going to have to bring their own structure and their own kind of best self to the job. So great insight, Tim. Anybody else want to share any tips that you might have for students?
I wanted to echo that and just say from our perspective, because, you know, in anything innovative, you're trying to do things differently. I don't put a lot of stock, or we as a company, when we're looking at resumes, don't put a lot of stock in, you know, oh, you took the courses, because, you know, at that level, everyone is going to have that, right? And so we test a lot for, in the interviews and in the case studies, how do you think differently? If we shake you out of your comfort zone during the interview and get you off script, how do you know, improvise in that conversation, or, you know, whatever? How well do you handle being taken off the beaten path? And you know, I find that really valuable. And one of the ways that I found myself, one of the ways that I grew a lot when I was there was there are a ton of opportunities at Duke to get engaged with, quote, real world projects, you know, whether that's formally through clubs or like the one that I did was called the Environmental Law and Policy Clinic through the Duke Law School. I assume there are a lot of schools that have similar, like, hey, we're going to put you on, you know, at like the business school, and I think Case I3 they're like consultants for real companies. So the more you can stray outside of the classroom to working with like actual projects, you start to understand, oh, well, these are the skill sets and the facts, and, you know, the both soft and hard skills that are really valuable in helping me get my work done out in the field. And you start to triage, you know, these are the types of courses and trainings that will be helpful if I want to go on to do a PhD or like be an academic, versus like, here are the things that I need to do to be an entrepreneur, versus, you know, an engineer, versus a consultant, versus a financier, whatever. And so the more you can get that exposure, you know, it might even be one of the things that I did was if you find a professor who cool work that you're interested in, just like pop by their office hours and be like, hey, what are you working on? What can I help with? And I just was, just sort of his, just helped out on stuff he was doing, extracurricular projects he was doing that were non-academic, and that helped a lot.
Yeah, great suggestion, Jason. A couple thoughts for students, whether it's Duke Engage or Bass Connections, or there's certain clubs that have projects. We have I have it's called a Social Innovation Practicum, INE 511 in the spring, where we work on projects, including our UNICEF innovators. In that, Professor Clements has a couple global health practicum courses. So there are lots of opportunities, but I also love, Jason, you just talk to somebody, because you never know when a faculty member, a researcher has need. Like, we have requests all the time from our Duke-UNICEF innovators for help on whether it's evaluation work or marketing work or, proposal writing or finance. So, you never know when there's a practitioner out there who needs help. And if you talk to the right people, we can help to connect you. And I had to smile there. I loved your comment about watching as you interview folks and see if you take them off script, because you don't know this, but the founder of Quantified Ventures, Eric Letzinger, was a few years ahead of me in grad school, and then he ended up interviewing me for my job at PricewaterhouseCoopers consulting years ago. So you wouldn't have known that, but he interviewed me and he tried to shake me up. I guess I passed because they hired me. So
yeah, he's good at that.
Great examples. Now, how about Philile? Let's go over to you. I mean, you're in it. You're a student and you're a founder. Any suggestion you have for students to how to navigate this if it's of interest of theirs?
Yeah, my biggest recommendation, based on my own experience, is just develop a real curiosity for the problems that you care about. And that really speaks to what the co-panelists have said here. Like, you want to be digging deep and sort of thinking creatively and sort of being obsessed with it. And that really builds into your passion. And when you get to the point of either starting a venture or working for an organization that you care about, that passion will really see you through and give you some of that positive energy and resilience you need to push through. So that's what I would say. Just take as many opportunities to feed your curiosity.
Can I build on Philile's point just really quick? I think that, and it just totally resonate with that. And one of the things that, when I'm interviewing folks for Ashoka, sort of the standard question is like, okay, why or how is it that you want to use Ashoka to accomplish the thing that you want to accomplish in the world, right? It's not a destination for you, it's a mechanism for you to achieve some sort of impact. And to the extent that you have sort of a strong sense of what it is that you want to accomplish, then that's the sort of person you want.
Yeah, great comments. And I'm right now putting in chat for students if they're interested. There's a great series of life maps that were put together by the folks at Tackling Heropreneurship. They're worried about too many students kind of running out trying to solve all the world's problems and become social entrepreneurs in areas they weren't all that deeply engaged in. And they've got these great life maps where it identifies different pathways that folks have taken. And it would be interesting for folks to browse through them. And so I'm going to put it in chat right now, called Life Maps from Tackling Heropreneurship. And then you'll see I'm putting the link in right now. I recommend those to students if they're thinking about different pathways they could take. Well, let me encourage our audience. Feel free to shoot some questions over in chat, and we'll try and build some of those into our discussion here. While we're waiting for a few questions in chat, let me ask for anyone who'd like to respond. This time of COVID has just been such a wake up. And so I'm wondering if there's anything that you've discovered during this time of COVID where you've seen the field of social innovation kind of come to a reckoning of the need to be more resilient and kind of reckon with the effects of COVID. Anybody have any quick thoughts on that?
I have a quick comment that
Yeah.
I don't know to what extent this was mainly COVID. I imagine this was just one contributing factor alongside, the Biden administration, the changing of the administrations, just the general conversations around social inequity and economic inequality that have been, at least domestically, and then the really important conversations we've been having as a society around race and opportunity and equity. Those have all, in the relatively short time I've been at Quantified Ventures in 4 years, I've seen such an explosion of interest in and real commitment, teeth to wanting to put more resources towards building up equity from mainstream capital and philanthropic support and governments and policy in the past 4 years. It's just been really dramatic to see the focus from well, what is this impact investing thing? What is equity? What is resilience? And that sort of being kind of a wishy-washy thing that people we're almost using as to virtue signal into something that people genuinely believe. And I think that for the students on this call, the time is so ripe. The timing for you all to get into this field of wanting to marry what are traditionally separated silos of business and finance and entrepreneurship with social impact. I think this is such a really exciting time that the opportunity might not have been there a decade ago.
Such a great point, Jason. And maybe it's a signal of that. I don't know how public this is, so I can't reveal everything yet, but the Biden administration, I believe, is about to identify a Duke alum who's actually going to be serving as a climate and environment kind of innovation director. And so that'll be exciting news. Hopefully it should come out in the next few weeks, if I'm not mistaken. Unless anyone's got a pressing comment, I know Gonzalo has his hand up. So let's let Gonzalo join in here. Hey, Gonzalo, why don't you go ahead and ask your question? Are you able to unmute, Gonzalo?
Do you hear me? Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I was writing the question, but now that you allow me to speak, I'll do it.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone for sharing your experience and wisdom with us. My question is for Philile. Hi, Philile.
Hi.
I think what you're doing is amazing. I also stole your page a little bit. And my question is, I had a chance to work in Peru also in reproductive and sexual rights. And there are many, many communities in Peru, especially in the Amazon region, when teenagers, young girls are engaged in marriage with all adults. We're speaking about a 30-year, 40, even 50-year age gap between the young girls and the adults. And it's really hard to try to change that conceptions, because for them it's natural. This is how they have been living for many decades, and it's hard for them to try to explain why is this a trouble, and for them to see how problematic it is for the young girls. So what I would like to ask you is, how are you changing that? What is your approach with Govuka, and especially in Eswatini, from your experience? What are the most powerful measures or the most important approach that you are taking to this trouble to try to change that mentality or that way of seeing life?
Yeah, thanks for that question. It is such a sticky problem, and in so many ways, it has existed for so many years. This dynamic where young girls see the idea of engaging with older men as normalized or even desirable. And for us, what we have done, because specifically in our context, this is a phenomenon that is very much driven by peers. So peers are very much, either encouraging each other, sort of telling each other that this is maybe a good idea. And we're sort of trying to turn that on its head and use the peer network and the peer influence to sort of create a different idea of what is a desirable relationship or desirable future. And so this is kind of hard to figure out, which is why we're trying to use design thinking a lot more to sort of center goals a little bit in reshaping that narrative of, what does it mean to be a thriving, successful adolescent going into adulthood? And what does it mean to have a wonderful relationship? And then also, because discussions around sexual, I don't know if it's the same in Peru, I might assume it's the same. Most discussions around sexuality are not happening between young girls and their parents or young girls and their teachers, they're happening amongst peers. So really opening up that space so that more more useful, relevant information is sort of part of those conversations, and that they are sort of uplifting each other in the way that they would like to, but that we are seeing the trends, the very disturbing trends around teenage pregnancy and HIV infection really going down. So that's been our strategy. And Gonzalo, to be honest, like, we are, forging forward with full positivity that is the right path, but we are so ready to pivot if we find that it's not quite exactly landing the way we want. But yeah, that's how we're thinking about it now.
Well, Philile, I really appreciate the fact that you're embracing, human-centered design, starting with those affected by the problem, and then trying to build empathy and design, with them. It's not on our public website, but there was a great session we did with our innovators last year, where we had the co-founders of the Mental Health Hub do a session on women-centered design, and there's some really interesting insights. And I'm sure if that's something that'd be of interest to you, we could put our fingers on that recording and make it available to those who are interested. Thank you. Diana, you have a question.
Yes, I have. Hi, guys. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. My question is regarding scaling.
Oh, Diana, I think we lost your audio. You were asking about scaling, I believe. Oh, darn. Let's give it a few seconds. There we go. You're back, I think. Go ahead,
Okay.
Diana.
Okay. So my question is regarding scaling up your innovation. How do you deal with this main challenge? And what is your strategy for sustainability in your organization?
Yeah, I think that's relevant to everybody, right? Everyone wants to have greater impact in one way or another. And so the challenges of pathways to scale and how to sustain that scaling, I think could be really interesting. So feel free, any panelists, to share on that. And I know some of you are supporting innovators who are seeking to scale and be sustainable, and others are kind of directly, engaged in that work yourselves. So feel free, anybody, to jump in and share your thoughts on that.
I mean, one thing that I'll say from Ashoka's angle is that we have some amount of skepticism about sort of the scaling of organizations versus the scaling of ideas, and sort of the trajectory we've seen for many of our fellows who've had the greatest impact is, how do you move from founding an organization that demonstrates a concept to partnering with other entities that can scale that concept to informing national or international policy that sort of creates the conditions where the impacts that you want to see are preserved in some sort of legislation or policy. So it's about moving from being a founder to being an ambassador for the ideas behind your work.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, I know some of the programming that like the Ashoka globalizers have been working on is like, scaling through ecosystems. And there's some really interesting stuff out there that Ashoka has on ecosystem work. And I'll try and post that if I can in the time that's left. That's great, Tim. Anybody else want to share your thoughts on that scale? And
yeah, one thing that we've really tried to do at Conservation X Labs, particularly in the technology development side of things, is really focus on increasing access, increasing accessibility, and that's both in usability and in cost. So making sure that whatever we develop is both usable by people that may not have, an advanced education level, and also making sure that people aren't priced out of those innovations. And so that's kind of how we've focused on achieving scale. Ultimately, if we don't scale in the technology space, we don't have impact. And so that's something that we've really tried to focus on.
fantastic. Thanks, Sam. Anybody else want to share on the scale question, scale and sustainability? Philile, I know you're at the earliest stages. You must be thinking about how you design with scale in mind, right? You mentioned, for example, hybrid formats and so forth. So how are you thinking about, obviously it's in the future, but how are you thinking about these issues here at the beginning?
Yeah, I was sort of thinking about whether I should share kind of what we're thinking through. So one of the opportunities that is coming up very strongly is sort of how a digital format could really scale even beyond the borders of Swaziland. And I think thinking about hybrid is, having a strong footprint within schools once we have proof of concept. That is just a a clear path for us where, we just recruit more schools as our structure and just grow in that way. But in the digital format, we think, again, to sort of tack on to Tim's idea, I love the idea of an idea that just like propagates throughout, and we've heard a lot of people saying, oh, we also like, this is such a painful problem in our context. And so thinking a lot more about how do we launch an idea that really can go, even if we're not the ones directly implementing it, and having it as a sort of digital tool that really can work in many places where these problems exist, is something that we're thinking about going forward.
Yeah, Philile, remind me to follow up with you, because I had a speaker in my undergrad class last week who, when she was in grad school, she worked on a sex ed app, and it's now kind of gone viral, and it's gone to different parts around the world, and there may be some things that are interesting or useful to the work. It was not intended to go viral, but it has, so it's really interesting. So it's been such an amazing discussion, and we're almost at the end, which it kills me, right? There's such great rich content here and experiences, but I wonder for each panelist, as we start to close up, any brief thought that you might have for our students if they're pondering how they could have impact in the world. Any just kind of brief insight you want to share, or a little takeaway that you could leave folks with this evening? Anybody like to share and start?
Yeah, just quickly, at least for me, when I started my undergrad at Duke, I was a pure mechanical engineer, wanted to get into industry and do that kind of stuff. But taking a step back, I thought about what my passions were and stumbled into this somewhat. But I think it was a good lesson for me in that, whatever I'm passionate about, I can use that passion in my professional setting as well. It's just a matter of kind of looking outside of potentially more traditional fields. So, taking a step back, what are you good at, and how can you apply that to these issues you're passionate about, was something that I really took to heart during my time at Duke.
That's fantastic, Sam. Thank you for sharing that. Anybody else want to share?
Yeah,
Sure,
I feel like.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Oh, thanks.
Go ahead, Jason.
I feel like giving this advice is relatively easy for Duke students, because inherently folks are high achieving and motivated and passionate and interested and entrepreneurial. I do feel like Duke is a bit more of an entrepreneurial mindset than some other schools. And so, just keep doing what you're doing. My path towards what I'm doing was kind of circuitous. I started as an econ English undergrad, and then did a bunch of jobs, nothing related to environment or finance or anything, and then ended up here. So as long as you keep thinking about what it is that you care about and the problems you want to work on, certainly there are life paths where you don't have to do that, and there are other things that are important to you, right? But for the path to where you want to get to and working on the problem that you care about isn't always under your control. But the thing that is under your control is that you keep building towards in that direction and looking for opportunities and finding ways. And the field is growing and changing so quickly that I would say, even if something doesn't happen right away, just keep working, keep your chin up, keep looking for opportunities. I'm sure everyone on this call will land somewhere amazing doing impactful things.
Great tip, Jason. Thank you so much. Tim, you were going to share?
Sure. Yeah. And building on, I think Philile earlier mentioned curiosity. And it reminds me of, I forget, who said it, but there's this adage of to the extent that you want to have an impact on the world and to solve problems, 95% of your work is understanding the problem. And so I think as entrepreneurial as sort of Duke students can be, there's also a tremendous amount of privilege associated with folks. I know, just speaking for myself, I came out of Fuqua like a raging egomaniac, and I tried to rewrite the strategic plan of an Ashoka fellow that I worked for, within 6 months of starting at her organization. Fortunately, I've chilled out a little bit over the years, but humility is so important. And it's not just about having an impact, and even the word impact itself is kind of violent. It's how do you create benefit for a variety of communities, some of which you're not even thinking about when you go about seeking to make change.
Yeah.
Such a great point, Tim, that you share. Thank you so much. How about Philile? How would you lead folks?
Yeah, I just really agree with everything that's been said. I would say for people early, I mean, before this, I worked a couple of years in sort of development consulting. And one thing I took from that is that just learn as much as you can wherever you are, because a lot of those skills, I didn't think I didn't enjoy everything I did, but it's so useful. Once you learn it, you've got it, and you can just leverage it whenever you need it. So definitely just sit in whatever opportunity comes and make the most of it and learn as much as you can.
Such a great point, Philile. My first boss in consulting told me to bloom where you're planted. There are opportunities to make change, to be an entrepreneur, to be a change maker within different kinds of institutions or organizations. And the last thought I'll leave as we close up tonight is what an amazing alumni network we have. I really encourage you to talk with people who have been blazing trails in these careers, learn from them, informational interviewing and shadowing, apprenticing. Always, we've got an amazing alumni, including these folks here. So please, everybody, join me in thanking Philile, Jason, Sam, and Tim. We appreciate your time this evening, and thank you for joining us. And everybody, thanks so much for taking time this evening. My class, let's make it 6:45 that we reconvene. All right, my class will be reconvene 6:45. And everybody else, we hope to see you at some of the other Duke-UNICEF Innovation Accelerator Forum events this week. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a great evening. Thanks so much to our panelists.
Thanks, everybody.
Appreciate it, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Bye, everyone.
Thanks a lot, guys. Really appreciate it.